Welcome back to MB Capital Strategies. Today we're going to analyze my entire portfolio again, and we'll take a look at how 2025 actually went. That means today we'll go through all the positions, all the distributions from 2025, that is, the months, and we'll also look at the forecast for that period. We'll cover all of 2026 today as well, so this will be a deep dive video. First, let's take a look at the current state. Invested, 71,432. Portfolio value, 76,702. Unrealized capital gain currently at 3,410 euros and 68 cents. Internal rate of return at 11.6. Dividends, 5,151.95 and realized gain of 23.39 euros. My top movers are Fresnillo, Changxi, Copper, Channel Life Insurance, Xpeng, and Barrick Mining. We can also take a look at the whole thing here if you like. Gross dividends, 6,355 euros and 70 cents. Interest, 106 euros and 76 cents. That adds up to a total of 9,896 euros and 53 cents. Taxes, 1,151 euros and 12 cents. Fees, 1,457 euros and 78 cents. That results in a nice sum of 7,288 euros and 63 cents. The fees are a bit higher. Yes, since I have a larger stock portfolio, I naturally have to build up all the positions at the beginning, but in the long run, of course, that's definitely negligible. Currently, my largest position is as follows. CMB Tech operates in the shipping sector and is also more focused on green future technologies. They are essentially transforming their shipping operations to build ammonia-powered ships and are currently even leading in this field. The current entry price was 8 euros and 46 cents, totaling 2,261 euros and 78 cents, with dividends of 27 euros and 11 cents. It's important to note here that they are currently investing more in growth, which is why they only pay out a small dividend. I still want to hold on to it because I expect a dividend yield of about 5% in the next 2 to 3 years. Plus, I could also imagine that this company might at some point carry out one or another spin-off. Then we have Flex here. LNG at 26.97 euros. Here I hold 83 shares, also a very good position with a cost basis of 32 euros. Currently down 20%. I'm not buying more at the moment because the position is already quite large. I'm simply holding them because they pay out very good dividends. Then we have Tungala Resources here with 402 shares at 5 euros and 33 cents. In total, purchased or received dividends amounting to 155 euros. Currently down 2%. It's definitely active in coal, so coal mining in South Africa. Then Dorian, LPG is also in the shipping sector, with 391 euros and 57 cents in dividends, 91 shares at 21 euros and 14 cents. Then Tom, 110 shares at 15 euros and 99 cents, 145 euros and 30 cents in dividends. So Tom is also in the shipping industry. Ecopetrol. Is it an oil company in Colombia? Producer? Purchased at 7 euros and 99 cents, already received dividends of 93 euros and 62 cents, then Medical Property Trust, 5 euros and 45 cents. Currently my purchase price, I'm holding 220 shares at the moment with dividends of 89 euros and 48 cents. I'm also not buying more here even though the drawdown is relatively high, and I always say that I buy more after a 10% drop. I'm not doing that right now because the interest burden is still putting some pressure on the properties. And the company already has a few rental defaults anyway. That's why I'm just sitting back for now and waiting to see how things develop before making any further purchases. Petrobras is also an oil producer in Brazil with 67 euros and 1 euro and 70 cents in dividends, currently down 15%. I will probably buy more here, I'm thinking maybe around February. If oil drops again, then we also have Vale here, which is also a mining stock. Current dividends of 47 euros, holding 107 shares, bought at 9 euros and 17 cents. Then we also have Energian here, with 87 shares at 10 euros and 55 cents, with a dividend of 53 euros and 49 cents. But Realty Trust, with a purchase price of 10 euros and 59 cents, a total of 85 shares, 899 euros and 80 cents. That's my entry value, currently minus 35%. That's 112 euros and 50 cents in dividends that I have received. Here too, I want to wait for the next quarterly reports before I buy more. And I will probably make further purchases at the end of 2026, if this interest rate cut really does reach the company. Currently, interest rates are a bit higher, but they are now being lowered. But in the end, that hasn't reached the company yet. There's always a bit of a delay. Then we have BWLPG here, also in shipping. 117.5 shares with a purchase price of 7.45 euros, dividend of 147.46 euros. Then Energas with 7.6 shares at an average price of 12 euros and 93 cents and 50 euros and 37 cents. That's the dividend I received. For me, Energas is definitely a very reliable stock. Ultimately, it's a pipeline company responsible for keeping the entire EU network running, mainly with gas and now also through investments in the hydrogen sector. So without Energas, the EU doesn't function. Then we have BP here. Here I hold 184 shares with a purchase price of 4 euros and 53 cents, dividend already of 46 euros and 76 cents. Then we have Lufthansa, 105 shares at 7 euros and 33 cents, dividend of 38 euros and 90 cents. And I had already realized a capital gain before of 24%, amounting to 126 euros and 22 cents. Then we have Volkswagen, 8 shares at 93 euros and 90 cents, received a dividend of 49 euros and 34 cents, currently up by 77 euros and 60 cents. Why do I hold VW? Quite simply for the reason, yes, that's right. The car manufacturer in Germany is really having a hard time at the moment. In my opinion, though, it's simply that the locations are being relocated. That means Germany is simply being downsized and jobs are just being created in the USA and elsewhere. That's just a fact. Of course, that's a shame for Germany. But VW is going where labor costs and energy prices are lower. Then we have here Dow with 28 euros and 86 cents in dividends, currently down 20%, and a purchase price of 27 euros and 91 cents. So here I would probably also consider simply increasing my position next time. So Dow is in the chemical sector. Then here we also have International Seaways. Here I hold 20 shares with a purchase price of 34 euros and 29 cents, dividend of 51 euros and 60 cents. Then I have APA, which is an oil producer. Here I hold 35 shares with a purchase price of 19 euros and 53 cents and a dividend of 24 euros and 77 cents. Then SIM Shipping, purchased for 13 euros and 82 cents. I hold 9 Which shares, received 39 euros and 44 cents in dividends. Then I have UPS here with a dividend of 29 euros and 72 cents. Realty Income with a dividend of 23 euros and 4 cents. 13 shares for 1 euro and 57 cents. iShares, ultra short accumulation. This simply means that I put my money there for the short term. And of course, if there are major crashes, so to speak, I would sell this position, get a bit of interest, or rather a coupon, and then sell the whole thing and use the money to buy cheap stocks. Then we have here Riley Exploration Permian with 15 euros and 43 cents in dividend stocks, down by 10% and a total of 27 shares for 24 euros. 22 is my entry price. Then we also have British American Tobacco. For those who don't know it, well, I think everyone knows British American Tobacco. That brings us to 19 shares at 32 euros and 20 cents each, totaling 117 euros and 62 cents. Dividend that I received. Then Innovative Industrial Properties, that's a real estate company that specializes specifically in, you could say, cannabis greenhouses, which they simply rent out primarily. Here we have a total of 10 shares for 850 euros and 13 cents, with a current dividend of 35 euros and 89 cents. Then we also have Pfizer with 25 shares for 20 euros, 24 dividend of 22 euros, 93 cents. Global Medical REIT with 17.2 shares for 31 euros and 98 cents, dividend of 8 euros and 18 cents. Then we also have Petrotal. Petrotal is currently deep in the red because it's a very small cap stock. And as soon as the oil price drops a bit, it tends to fall quite a lot as well. Currently with a price, or rather a dividend, of 34 euros and 5 cents. Petrotal is basically a very small stock, but when oil prices are good, it pays out massively as well. Then we also have the treasury bond here. That is simply supposed to provide a bit of, well, ultimately some coupon of 4.1. At least 4.7%, or rather about 4.5%. Let's take another quick look at this, just so I don't say anything wrong. So here as well, my money is just a bit parked. Better than in a savings account just to get something in dividends. And that would be 4.36%. At least that way we balance out the situation a bit, with 3% per year. Then we also have BCE, a telecommunications provider in Canada, currently with 18 euros and 86 cents in dividends, minus 13%. I hold 21.8 shares. Then we also have Onyok with 8 shares, currently with a gain, so a dividend of €3.28, which I received. Then there's Kraft Heinz with 25 euros, 20 shares, currently down 20%. I won't be buying more here for now simply because the dividend is a bit lower, but I also want to benefit from the spin-off here. Then we have Cardinal Energy here with a dividend of 35 euros 56. Purchase price is 4 euros 13, a total of 123 shares. Then we also have Glencore here. I hold 93 shares at 5 euros 25. Current dividend of 8 euros 20. Then we also have Banco do Brasil, a bank in Brazil, dividend of 6 euros 7, currently down 20%. So here I will definitely consider increasing my position. I will definitely take another look at the latest quarterly reports. And then we also have Equinor, dividend of 19 euros 60 and purchase price at 21 euros 60. In total, I hold 22 shares. Then we also have Wallenius, Wilhelmsen Logistics. It's practically a shipping stock, but one that specializes in machinery in order to simply promote machinery. So practically in the raw-to-raw range. Then we have dividends of 54 euros 79. Currently 68 shares for 6 euros 82. Then we also have Frontline in the shipping sector. 31 shares, 14 euros 92. Dividends of 34 euros 4. XRO is also active in the coal sector, including in South Africa, but now also with a focus, I would say, on green energy. Currently 59 shares at 7 euros 72, specifically a dividend of 33 euros 85, which I have kept. Then we also have Diana Shipping, also shipping, 277 shares, 1 euro 69, dividend of 9 euros 27. Then BASF, 10 shares for 44 euros 87, and a dividend of 19 euros 58. Then there's Ajeo. Here I have 19 shares for 23 euros 14 with a dividend of 5 euros 4, currently with about 17% underwater. Then Lionel Basel Industries, that's also a chemical giant with 9 shares for 7 euros 7, a dividend of 20 euros 43, which I received. Then AKBP, 21 shares for 20 euros 3, 20 euros 95. BHP with 19 euros 21 in dividends. Then we also have Valterra Platino with 113% and 1.65 euros in dividends. Then Central Asia Metals with 5 euros 39 in dividends, 219 shares. Rio Tinto with 22 euros 42 in dividends. Then we also have Brazil Agro with 5.89 in dividends, currently 11% underwater. Then MPC Container Ships, also shipping. 263 shares and 38 euros 61. Brazil Agro is responsible for agribusiness in Brazil. One should know that Brazil is the largest exporter of agricultural products. That's why, for me, this is definitely a sensible investment. Then we also have Repsol with a dividend of 23 euros 17, which I received, with a total of 34 shares. Then Western Union with shares bought at 8 euros 29, 12 euros 55 in dividends. Then InPlay Oil with 20 euros 22 in dividends. Panoro Energy, 25 euros 76 at 1 euro 98. Both are also active in the oil sector. Then we also have Gladstone Land here. That's simply agricultural land that they rent and lease out. Here, 37 shares for 10 euros 40 and 14 euros 68 in dividends, also currently down less than 20%. Then we also have NL here with 8 euros 64 in dividends. I hold 65 shares for 5 euros 85. Then Flower Foods, I will also take a look at the latest quarterly report and buy more because I'm simply down 36%. And here, a dividend of 12 euros 54. Then there's Pembina Pipeline, a pipeline operator, with a dividend of 7 euros 21, a total of 11 shares. Then we essentially have Petrobras again, only this time ADR, meaning via the USA, with 33 shares. 11 euros 14, currently also with 14% in the water, and 6 euros 50, 40 received in dividends. Then there's Porsche Automobile Holding, currently paying a dividend of 13 euros 80. Then Orlen. Then I had bought 30 shares. At 12 euros 19, the dividend I received was 42 euros. Then we also have Champion Iron. I think those are pretty much my largest positions already. I'll just quickly go through the list again. either through or downwards. Then you'll see what else is represented there and what else is coming up. If you have any further questions about this, just let me know. Then we also have Keys-Tombrum. Helmrich and Payne is an oil field services provider. In other words, they also do maintenance for all the oil drillers. Berg Autoliners is also shipping, Hapag-Lloyd as well, then Phillips 66, then Gerdau, Novo Nordisk. Exactly, so I've now included all the pharmaceutical companies because they were really at a low point, just like UPS. Then there's Aero Energy, Verizon, right? I'll just take a look to see if there's anything else I can highlight as I go through, if anything comes to mind that's particularly important. PayPal now pays a small dividend. You can't really neglect it, but who knows what might happen in the future. Yeah, I've just gone through it a bit now, or rather, still going through it right now. But there really isn't much more, just some smaller speculative positions that were added. For me, since I'll be holding on to them simply in the food consumption sector for South Africa, you always need Anglo Gold. I would also just hold on to Shanti. They've gone up so well and their numbers are good now, plus their dividend. Yeah, so that's how things look for me at the moment. A few positions that are maybe close to 100 euros. I might increase those, or I might definitely sell them soon. I'll just weigh it up. That's how it is. For example, that's what I'm doing now with Philip Morris. Of course, I'd like to increase my position there, and I'm just looking for a good buying price to come up. I could also imagine increasing my position in Veolia Environment. It's very defensive and operates in water treatment. And with some positions, it's just a bit hard for me to get in, like Unilever Indonesia at 30%. I was already up 117% there. In my opinion, they also pay a very good dividend, and of course, they're based in Indonesia. And as I said, food will always be needed here as well. With BMW, I'm still a bit undecided about what to do. I could imagine selling, but on the other hand, I really got a very good purchase price here. Back then, I managed to get in. Unfortunately, it was just a small position, but everyone has to start small. And those were basically my first stocks, which I still hold in my portfolio today. With Heaven Coal, it's also practically about dividends, so I'm involved a bit in coal as well. I'll just let this one run as well, for the coal play. Otherwise, these are all stocks like Presnilo with 408%. And 5.63 in dividends compared to my initial investment is definitely quite solid. For gold mine, it's almost 10%, then SPM Offshore. Freenet. Exactly as you can see. There are just a few speculative plays in there as well, like Okugen, Mara Holdings, or simply smaller stocks, or with farms, for example. I will definitely sell all of those when the year-end rally starts, or if it starts now. Once it starts, I'll see how they perform, because I'll probably just sell them off in February as well. And also slim down my portfolio a bit. Currently, I have 293 portfolio holdings as stocks. Before that, I had about 318, and I actually find 390 to be okay so far. I think I'll slim down my portfolio to maybe around 270. Just kick out a few portfolios, a few stocks that are just performing well, where they were simply intended as speculation. But that will happen a little bit more. I just happen to have a pair of those with me. These are just a few bets, like Kenobi Grows, eyeglasses. And what if they don't work? Or Xpeng, for example. But I'd like to let Xpeng run for a little while longer, if I join in now too. As you can see, it's up 150%. I might want to wait just a bit longer until the end of year rally is over in February, and then it will be sold and reallocated. So, but now I've really talked a lot, just about my stocks. So I'd say, let's just take a quick look at my dividend calendar in general, or rather, what actually came in, what was forecasted for 2025 in dividends. And that's where predictions were made, 4,134 euros and 15 cents. Or rather, that's roughly what I received, because everything has now been distributed here. And therefore, the data should also be consistent. Let's look at this. Sun 2025 total dividend $3,647.98. But let's take a quick look at that. The important thing here is that this is now my net dividend, because Parquet already receives all the tax certificates and can basically read out all the tax deductions and withholding tax. And that's why this display is net. So what does that mean in reverse? If we now take the 71,432 euros and 97 cents, of course we would first use the gross version, 4,134 euros and 15 cents divided by 71,432 euros and 97 cents. That's what I invested. And that times 100 gives me a current dividend yield of 5.787%, which definitely still has a lot of room for improvement. You also always have to keep in mind that the capital you invest only really starts to have an effect afterwards, so to speak, at least a little bit. 2025 was really more about building up for me, because in May I still had a lot of positions that I had invested in. And I think that will change again starting in 2026. But we'll just take a look at all of that calmly and thoroughly. Let's just see what might have already happened by January 2026. At that point, you'll be fully invested. So as you can see, I've already done pretty well again. In the end, I received dividends. Actually, there were only purchases, or rather, only dividends. I haven't made any purchases or sales here in January yet. And we've already gone through that in my last December portfolio update. So I'd say let's just take a look at the dividend dashboard from Parkit. Total dividends received are now at 5,151.95 cents. As you know, last year I received something like 3,000. I'd actually have to check again. But honestly, I really can't remember anything. Exactly, so that was 4,134 euros and 15 cents. So as you can clearly see, I haven't received many dividends yet. To be honest, it all really came together last year and finally matured. The system's monthly income is therefore 305 euros and 81 cents. Annual income over the last 12 months, 3,669 euros. Personal dividend yield of 5.14%. Everything I receive in dividends is reinvested by me. So let's just take a look at the following scenarios in the end. We've already covered all of that. Exactly. So here you can also see that in 2002, I had 25 euros and 74 cents in dividends. In 2023, it was already 369 euros and 82 cents. And here in 2024, that's roughly when my strategy really started to work. Or rather, that's when I expanded and invested more. Now I had 1,060 euros. And in 2025, it's 3,648 euros and 2 cents. Here, of course, we currently always have a large increase, but around 2025, I also simply invested a larger amount overall. Yes, and that's basically how the whole thing looks. There are actually already some forecasts included here for around 2026 and 2027. But I'm curious to see where the whole thing will lead. Ultimately, my goal is to receive 1,000 euros in dividends by 2028 or 2029 at the earliest, but more likely around 2030. Now, if we take a look at the dividend calendar and see what's forecasted for 2026, that would be 5,631 euros and 63 cents. Yes, and that would look like this, practically speaking. We had a projected exhibition of 300 euros in January, February of 214, March 605 euros, April 903 euros and 62 cents, May 630 euros in June, 646 euros, then 334 euros in July, 260 euros in August, 717 euros in November, and 217 euros and 84 cents in September. In November, 210 euros and 85 cents. And in December at 587 euros and 92 cents. Of course, this is simply the expected payout for now, based on payout history and growth. And in reality, the payout can, of course, differ. This is roughly what you have just as a kind of guideline. And if you just take it like that, it would be 5,631 euros and 63 cents. If you simply take that in relation to my invested capital, I would have a payout of about 7.8% gross, which in my opinion is quite solid for now. Let's just see how the year 2026 ultimately develops. I'm actually very positive about commodities in general, or rather towards the end of 2026, beginning of 2027. So my strategy is actually designed for a real commodity supercycle, and I would say until 2032, maybe starting from 2027, so perhaps the end of 2026. We can already see this happening now since gold and silver are of course rising so much, and usually other commodities follow as well. That's how it has mostly been in history, or rather in the past, if you want to put it that way. This is partly because a lot of things are perhaps simply overvalued with AI and also with banks. And then there's also private debt, which is kind of operating in the background right now. It's running, and maybe there are already some defaults happening. I think 2026 could be a very volatile year. Maybe I'm wrong. Let's just see how things turn out. You're also welcome to share your opinion on this in the comments. So I'd say let's quickly go back and just discuss it briefly. I have my dividend reinvestment calculator here on my website, so feel free to check it out as well. I also have all my other calculators here, dividend calculator, or you can also simulate how the dividend grows per year. It just grows. You can do that right now, for example. And also the investment horizon. I'll just quickly use the dividend calculator now. Snowball Pro. Here we have a starting capital of 76,702 euros and 7 cents, a monthly savings rate of 800 euros. Now let's also enter my dividend yield that I will receive. That's 7.88% applies on costs. But now let's assume a conservative dividend growth of 3%. For price growth, I'd maybe just say 5%. Of course, as I said, this is just a simple calculation, but it's pretty cool to just run through it. Let's just go with a period of 10 years now, and the dividends will be reinvested after taxes. And then it would look something like this. The pro values after 10 years, 428,910 euros. And a net dividend in the last year of 28,763 euros and 63 cents. That means you would reach a net dividend of about 79 euros and 2 cents in 2031. So net to gross, it would probably happen around 2029, I think, but I'm curious to see. This is simply meant to show, perhaps for someone who is just starting out, depending of course on their strategy, let's say a dividend yield of 5%, you can leave the price growth as is, and everyone can enter their own tax rate on dividends. But let's look at a period of maybe 40 years. And this is just to show that if you invest continuously, you can really achieve something. And in doing so, you can really achieve something significant. That means after 40 years, you would have a total amount of 4,089,212 euros and a nice dividend of 495,086 euros after 40 years. So if someone starts investing maybe at 18 or let's say at 20, then they can actually enjoy a carefree life during retirement, or maybe even retire earlier as a result. This is really just meant to briefly show, by simulating it quickly, because I'm someone who always needs to see things in front of me a bit, so that you can visualize it a little better in the end. Then I would actually say that this pretty much wraps up the entire video, the deep dive. I think we've really gained a very comprehensive impression now of the entire strategy, maybe also a bit of an idea of which stocks I hold. Of course, this is not investment advice, but simply my personal strategy. We also took a look at how the year 2026 might develop. I'm happy about every comment. I'd also be happy to answer them. Let's just start a discussion round. Maybe we can get one going. How do you think 2026 might turn out?